My name is John. I'm one of the pastors here at First Free. If you are joining us, whether you're joining us here in person or hello to all of you who are joining in online, we've been going through a series in the book of Galatians. It's how we do things here at First Free. We just pick a book of the Bible, we go through verse by verse and try to get as much as we can out of it. This book, Galatians, is a part of a group of books that are they're letters. And so this letter is written by a man by the name of Paul, St. Paul, the Apostle Paul. He's writing to church or churches in this area called Galatia, hence the Galatians. And a big part of what he's trying to do is that Paul planted this church. He helped birth this church. He brought this church together. But the church in the first century is very different than our church today. I don't think that we talk about this really enough, but Christianity is not its own, just self-existent, standalone religion and faith. Christianity is deeply, deeply rooted in the Jewish faith, in Judaism. It's deeply rooted in the Jewish tradition. It's deeply rooted in the Jewish culture. And so this first century church is really this mixture of people who were raised in that. They were raised with the Jewish scriptures. They were raised with the Jewish traditions. They were raised in the Jewish culture. They were raised with the 600 plus rules and regulations and citings from the Old Testament. We view it as the Old Testament Jewish scriptures. That was their life. That's what they were raised in. And then there's a whole nother group in this first century church that knows nothing of that. They come from the Greek world, the Roman world. They come from this first century Mediterranean world. They don't know anything about the scriptures of these regulations or restrictions. And so this church in Galatia was planted by Paul, and it was planted on Paul's message, his gospel, which is, I am saved by grace through faith in Christ. That's it. That's what makes me right before God. I'm saved by grace through faith in Christ's life, death, and resurrection from that cross. God became flesh, took upon himself the guilt of mankind, overcame and was victorious against the powers of sin and death, and because of that, made a whole new eternal life possible. But what's happening in this church in Galatia, and Shane has already talked about it for the last couple of weeks. If you missed any of these messages, you can go to firstfree.org and rewatch them. But Paul is trying to give an encouraging word, but also a kind of very stern, challenging word. He says to the Galatians, who bewitched you? Who's gotten into your head? Who's changed your mind about this gospel? Because it seems like there's some individuals who are making their way into this Galatian church who are trying to tell these believers, these early believers, these people coming from the Greek and Roman world, that yes, God did become flesh. Yes, he died on that cross. Yes, he was resurrected from the dead. Yes, salvation is a part of that. But you also still need to do some of these old things. You still have to do some of our tradition, some of our culture. You still have to do some of these rules and laws and practices. You still have to do some of this. You can't just throw it all out. You still have to do some of this. Paul calls them the Judaizers, these individuals who were a part of the Christian faith, yet almost in a sense adding something to it from the days of the old traditions. And one thing that they talk about specifically is circumcision. So hold on to your seats for 50 minutes of circumcision talk. No graphs. But he talks about circumcision. This is one of the things that was really, really important, and one of the things that they tried to add to the gospel of Christ. And so we're going to talk about a lot of things actually this morning, maybe more things than I should have put on the list. We're going to talk about this Jewish history of our Christian faith. We're going to talk about Abraham. We're going to talk about covenant. Yeah, we're going to talk about circumcision. We're going to talk about a royal wedding. We're going to talk about the word scarcity. We're going to talk about the word surplus. We're going to talk about tickle me Elmos. We're going to talk about this immeasurable, incredible thing called grace that Paul seems to be talking about in this book of Galatians. And my hope is that by the end of it, this message is for any of us here or any of us watching this online who have ever felt like it's got to be something more. It can't just be this simple. There must be something more that I'm not doing right. There must be something more to this to earn God's love and favor and delight. There has to be something more. For anyone here who is feeling tired and just burnt out and worn out with this whole faith thing because it just doesn't seem like we're doing enough to make God happy, hopefully we leave here with a sense of this incredible grace. So let's pray. And we're going to dive in to this question of who's in and who's out. God, I thank you for who you are. I thank you for your word. I thank you for your love. I thank you for your grace, your truth, your mercy. I thank you for who you are. And I pray that this next 30, 40, 50 minutes would be a time of just a right now, your presence. Whether we are all here in one room or we're viewing in online, wherever we may be, would you just speak a right now word of your grace and your mercy? Would you lift some of those heavy burdens off of our backs that just says, I can't do enough, I can't do this right, I can't do this perfectly. There must be something more. There's got to be something more to this. Would you break down some of those walls that we put up, some of those expectations that we put up, and would you allow us to simply be lost in this beautiful grace that we have not deserved and yet we can experience? Yeah, let us experience you today in your name. Amen. In the first century, Jesus told a story. You can find it in Matthew chapter 22. He starts the story off this way. There was once a king who prepared a wedding reception for his son. Now, this king and son, they actually got along really well. It wasn't one of those estranged relationships. It wasn't this son who's trying to, kind of do a mutiny or a coup to take over power from his father. He actually got along with the king very well. And this king loved his son so much. He was so excited to throw his son his wedding reception. And so from the very moment that this son, chose his bride, the king was all over it. Just an open checkbook. What's it going to take? Let's do this up. Let's do this well. We're going to spare no expense. So immediately, right, the king is a part of the save the dates, sending those out. He goes online and sets up the Not website with the countdown. He hires the photographer. He sends out the invitations. He coordinates all the food. All the decorations. Everything is supposed to be exquisite for his son, whom he really loves. Jesus says that this king sent out invitations. Now, let's just think about a royal wedding for a second, right? A royal wedding. Not everyone's getting an invitation to a royal wedding. You know that. I know that. There's been a couple royal weddings in Britain over the last decade. I didn't get an invite. But we still want to see it. I think my wife is one of those people that got up super early in the morning to watch it live on TV. Some of you are also in that. I know it. There's something about a royal wedding because it is just everything you would imagine, so exquisite. And so Jesus says these invitations were sent out. And I have to imagine this was like the elite of the elite that got the invitations. The A squad, the first listers, the number ones he sends out. And Jesus says that when the day finally came for the king's son's wedding, I would imagine that this king wakes up in the morning, he looks out the window expecting to see a huge line of everyone who's invited. I can't wait to get into the royal courts, the palace courts to celebrate this day. He can already smell the smells of all the food trucks, all the vendors who are around. You don't do food trucks at a royal wedding. But there's food from all the different areas of his kingdom, right? There's the steak hut over here. There's the barbecue truck over here. There's the Euro truck over there because you have to have one of those. There's steak and barbecue. There's a fish fry happening over there for all the Wisconsin people. There's also the dietary restriction truck way over in the back, hidden. But at least it's there, right? It's separated. There's something for everyone. Everything is ready, except Jesus says there's no guests. The save the dates went out. The website was set up. The engagement pictures were posted. The invitations were sent out. But Jesus says no one who was invited was waiting outside for the wedding. Who would turn that down? What do you have more important than your life than an invitation to a royal wedding, incredible food, decorations, and my guess would be an open bar? Not that that's important. What else do you have? So the king, confused, a little bit perplexed, he gathers together his servants, the ones who aren't already occupied with getting everything ready. He sends a message out throughout his entire kingdom. He says, hey, here's the list of people in your area that were invited to the wedding. Would you go knock on their doors and figure out what's going on? Jesus says. And so these servants go out, they start knocking on the doors of the invitees, the ones who are invited to the royal wedding that aren't there for his son's celebration. They knock on the doors, and some people would open the doors. And when they said, hey, today's the wedding, did you forget somehow the royal wedding that you're invited to? Are you coming? Let's go. Jesus says some people would answer the door, and they would simply say, yeah, I'm not going to make it. I got stuff to do. I got a deadline on a deal I'm trying to make. I got some stuff I got to go do in my garden. There's some fields I have to go harvest. I just don't have time. I have to go. Some other people just didn't even open the door at all, just ignored the invitation. Some of them were so annoyed by the king and the servants that they actually beat and killed the servants who came to invite them to the wedding. So the question is, what does a king do who's trying to throw a party for his son, but the ones who were first invited didn't show up? What's a king to do who wants to have this great day for his son's wedding, and people ignore the invitation? What's a king to do when no one shows up? We'll come back to Jesus' story in a little bit. First, let's read our verses in Galatians chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. Now, these first couple chapters of Galatians is really just Paul giving his resume. He's really just citing all these things that have already happened in the past, and we're in the middle of that. He's citing all the reasons why he's qualified to be planting churches, why he's qualified to be preaching the gospel, why he's qualified to even write to them, why he's qualified to tell them that they're being bewitched and they should change and go back to the original gospel that he preached. And so we're in the middle of this history lesson from Paul, and that's where we're going to be spending our time this morning. Galatians chapter 2, verse 1 says this: Then after 14 years, Paul speaking, after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem, this time with Barnabas. I took Titus along also. I went in response to a revelation, and meeting privately with those esteemed as leaders, I presented to them the gospel that I had preached among the Gentiles. Gentile is simply a word that means anyone who wasn't a part of that Jewish culture, tradition, faith, so on, etc. I wanted to be sure I was not running and had not been running my race in vain. Yet not even Titus, who was with me, was compelled to be circumcised, even though he was a Greek. Now this matter arose because some false believers had infiltrated our ranks to spy on the freedom that we have in Christ Jesus and to make us slaves. We did not give in to them for a moment, so that the truth of the gospel might be preserved for you. Verse 6. As for those who were held in high esteem, whatever they were makes no difference to me. God does not show favoritism. They added nothing to my message. On the contrary, they actually recognized that I had been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been to the circumcised. For God, who was at work in Peter as an apostle to the circumcised, was also at work in me as an apostle to the Gentiles. James, the disciple James, the apostle James, the brother of Jesus James, Cephas. If you're taking notes, just write Peter right next to that. That's another name for Peter. So James, Cephas, and John, Peter, James, and John, these esteemed as pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship when they recognized the grace given to me. They agreed that we should go up to the Gentiles and they should go to the circumcised. Verse 10, all they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor, the very thing I had been eager to do all along. I said that this first century church was this mixture, this melting together of individuals who come from this Jewish faith and tradition and culture and those who don't. And if we don't understand the importance of that history, then we're going to miss why there's tension. We're going to miss why this is such a big deal. And to be honest with you, what we're looking at here, this event that Paul's talking about, going to Jerusalem, this meeting that he had with these pillars of the faith, God can do whatever he wants, but as far as history is concerned, that event is the only reason why we're here. Like, let that soak in. The only reason, unless some of us come from a Jewish background and Jewish tradition, Jewish culture, Jewish faith, the only reason that we're meeting in churches and have been meeting in churches for 2,000 years is because of this meeting that Paul has with these apostles. Like, let that sink in. What we are looking at today is a door being opened for salvation to everyone who wasn't originally from a Jewish faith or culture or tradition. That's what we're looking at. That's pretty big. And if we don't understand the context of that Jewish history, culture, and tradition, then we're going to miss it. In our day and age, when we talk about circumcision, it's like that optional surgery you can have for your son who's born. And there's debate on the health of it, the science of it, the reason for it, the necessity of it, and all that. But there was no debate from a Jewish context. This was not a small, insignificant thing. And so I'm going to look at 3 passages. Follow me here. I want to look at 3 passages to let us understand the gravity of this, to understand the tension that is existing, to understand why this is becoming such a point of contention. There is more to this than just this simple, offset, optional surgery. And here's why. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 5. We're going all the way back to the story of a man named Abram or Abraham. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land that I will show you." Here's a little history of the ancient Near Eastern world. It was very cyclical and repetitive. Anyone who likes history, you can pay attention. The rest of you just nod off for a little bit. The ancient Near Eastern world was cyclical and repetitive. What I mean by that is that things didn't really change. There's a good chance that you were born in the exact same town that your parents were born in. And their parents before them, and their parents before them. There's actually a really good chance that you were born in the house that your parents were born in, and your grandparents were born in. Your family usually stayed together. You didn't go anywhere. No one went off to another city to go to college. No one left home to go find their own way. No one really left home to take a promotion on the other side of the country because it was a better job. You learned the craft and the trade of your family, and chances are you never left that. The cycle of life just kept repeating itself over and over in your own little town, your own little village. You stayed where you were always from. So much so, a little thing I learned about the ancient Near Eastern world this last week is that there's also a chance that since your whole family probably lived in the same house, that when your grandparents, your parents, your grandparents might die, they were often buried underneath the home. Now that might not seem that strange, right? Except for the fact that they still believe that they were with you. You know, sometimes we use that phrase like, well, you know, grandpa and grandma were still with us. Aunt and uncle so-and-so, they're still with us. My parents, they're still with us. But in the ancient Near Eastern world, they actually literally believed that they were still somehow conscious and somewhat alive, buried under the deck. And so they took responsibility for like giving them food and water. I mean, that was the extent of their belief that they're still with us. They're still a part of things, right? If your kids were running around making too much noise in the house, you would scold them because you're going to disturb grandma and grandpa's rest under the deck. You didn't leave anywhere. You didn't go anywhere. Your cycle of life was very repetitive, and it was most likely in the same place that you've always been and your family's always been. That seems weird to us maybe a little bit. So when God says to Abram, leave. When God calls Abram in Genesis chapter 12 and says, leave your home and leave your land and take the family that you have with you and take all your possessions and go somewhere else that I'm going to show you. This was revolutionary in the ancient Near Eastern world. It's almost as if God is changing the story. God is pulling us forward. God is breaking the cycle. And this is the very start of our introduction to the people of Israel and the Jewish faith, the Jewish culture, the Jewish traditions. It starts with the patriarch of patriarchs, Abraham, when God broke the cycle. He says this in verse 2, I will make you, Abram, into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Not many people got a message like that from the divine. We're going to talk about it in a second, but other people groups believed that there were gods Other people believed in this idea of the divine. Other people believed in that, but not many of them would claim that they had a personal message from the divine that was calling them to break the cycle and repetitiveness of their culture and tradition. Not many of them got a message that said, I will bless you. I'm going to bless you with a nation. I'm going to bless you with a land. I will make you a blessing to all people, and anyone who doesn't bless you, I'm going to curse. That was kind of unique. God is starting something with Abraham. And so Abram went as the Lord had told him. Lot, who was his nephew, went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions that he accumulated, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. God is doing something. What is he doing? Genesis chapter 15. And after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. God says to Abram, don't be afraid, Abram. I am your shield and your very great reward. Abram pushes back against the divine. He says, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. He's 75 years old and he doesn't have any kids. It's kind of a big deal. Abram said, you have given me no children. A servant in my household will be my heir. In other words, you say you're going to be a blessing. You're going to bless those who bless me. You're going to make all of my generations to come a blessing to all people, and yet there are no generations to come. The one who's going to inherit everything that is me is a servant in my house who's not even from here. Then the word of the Lord came to him, this man shall not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. God takes Abram outside. Said, Abram, look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. I wonder if there was even like a moment where Abram's like, okay. 1, 2, 3, 5,002. I lost track. 1, 2. God said, so shall your offspring be. Imagine hearing that. Imagine being over 75 years old. Let's not even have the discussion of lifespan and all that. Let's just say you're over 75 years old and you have never had a child. And God says, look up at the stars. This is how many offspring you're going to have. What is your immediate reaction? Okay. Yeah. This many? Are you sure? Couldn't do more than this? Really? He looks up at the stars, over 75 years old. God tells him, this will be the number of your offspring. And verse 6, Abram believed the Lord. Okay, if you say so. I think God can use that little bit of faith, that little bit of belief that we have, that we think is insignificant and not enough. I think God can use that. Not only does he use it, but God says he credited that to Abram as righteousness. That little bit of faith, that little bit of, okay, God, that doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make sense to anyone, really. I don't know how you're going to do that, but okay. God can take that little bit of faith in your life, and he credited to Abram as righteousness. He also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. You are going to have an offspring more numerous than the stars, and this land I'm going to give you. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? How can I know? Has anyone ever been there? You have this feeling that your life is going to produce something. You have this feeling that God put something in your heart. You have this feeling that like you feel like God's leading you something, that something good is going to happen. You have dreams. You have ambitions that are beyond just your own, I'm going to be an NBA star. It's like this this real thing that God put on your heart. And you're like, God, yeah, but how do I know? How do I know that this is going to happen? I've been there. There have been times in my life where I'm just like, God, can I just know? Yes, I'm going to have faith. Yes, I'm going to try to believe. Can I just know that I know that I know? Can you give me something? We often use this word in the church world, right? Can you give me a sign? Can you give me some sort of sign, some sort of indicator? So the Lord said to him, as he probably says to all of us, bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. And I was like, God, am I going to go to seminary? He's like, yeah, John, bring me a heifer and a goat, a ram, 3 years old. Abram does it. He just does it. right? Doesn't that seem weird? Like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I see what we're doing here. I'm going to go get those. I wonder if this is something that Abram was used to, because this is the start of what's called a covenant ceremony. A covenant ceremony. Abram brought all of these to God, and he cut them in two. It's gory, I know, it offends some of us today. He brought these animals, he cut them in two, and he arranged them in halves, almost creating a tunnel in between, except the birds, too small. So large animals, you cut in half, you create a tunnel to walk through. Verse 12, as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, imagine being Abram. The Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. If you want to know what he's talking about, read the book of Exodus. But I will punish the nation that they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. One, he's telling them about the Exodus. He's telling them that not only are you going to have generations that come from you, but they are going to be enslaved for 400 years, but they're going to come out triumphantly, and they're going to come out with great possession. He's still laying there with no son. He's still laying there with nothing to show for this, except the smell of these cut in half animals. He's got nothing else to show for it. No other evidence that God's going to come through. Do you hear me? He's got nothing else. And God says, you're going to have so many descendants, they're going to go into slavery for 400 years. But don't worry, I'm going to take care of them, and I'm going to bring them out of that. I'll punish the nation that enslaves them. They're going to come out with great possession. But you will never see it. You will never see it. You will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. My promise of faithfulness to you is for future generations, even if you don't see it. You are playing a part in greatness to generations to come, even if you don't see it in your own life today. The thing that God is asking us to have faith for is something that may not even be something that we see, but it's going to be something that generations after us see. Is it still worth our time and effort to have faith in God to bring about something good for someone else? Or is it just for us? Do you understand me? Abram, you will go to peace, but your descendants after you will come out of slavery after 400 years. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here. 4 generations later, they'll come back here. And they'll have the land. You won't see it. Trust me. Verse 17, when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, it says something that looked like a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces of the animals cut in half. Covenant ceremony. There's some who actually say that this covenant ceremony was meant to be this symbolic representation, these animals cut in half and put on separate sides, creating an aisle in between, right? This lane in between, so that the individuals who were coming into agreement, coming into covenant, this wasn't just like a weak contract. The symbolism is powerful. It's almost if the people who are coming into agreement together walk through the halves and they say, this is my promise to you. Whether you keep your end of the covenant or not, whether you keep your side of it or not, I will keep mine. And if I don't, may my fate be the same as these animals if I break this covenant. That's powerful. That's powerful imagery. And it's God himself who is going through the lane. It's God himself who is going through the pieces. It's God who is taking on a covenant with Abram. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. From the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, to the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Kadamites, Hittites, Perizzites, Raphaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. Like no applause for that? Like no? Just kidding. I'm just kidding. You all know we get to those and like, I'm just going to skip that because I can't say those words. Ancient Near History lesson number 2. The first one is that the ancient Near Eastern world was very cyclical and repetitive, right? You didn't break the cycle, you stayed where you're from. God broke that. God breaks the cycle, he starts something new with Abram. God is starting something new again in Genesis chapter 15. Other people in this ancient Near Eastern world had an idea of a god or gods, the divine. Most of them were representative of forces of nature, right? The sun, the rain, the harvest, fertility, reproduction. They had an idea of the divine or the gods, but most people in this ancient Near Eastern world believed that human beings were simply a slave labor force for the gods. We were created simply to take care of the earth, to do their bidding, and they could do whatever they want with us. Now, we could try to do everything right, but in the end, it's just them. They can decide if our crops grow or not, if we'll have a child or not, if it's going to rain or not, if it's going to rain not enough, it's going to rain too much. They got to decide that. We didn't really have any interaction with the gods other than we just did all the work to take care of the earth, and the gods could do whatever they want. Point being, there was no other ancient Near Eastern people group that had the idea that the God, the divine, would actually come into some mutually beneficial covenant with a human being. That didn't happen. The gods didn't pick out someone and say, I'm going to have a contract with you. I'm going to have a covenant with you. God is yet again doing something different, almost revolutionary. God is calling out Abram and saying, I'm going to make you a blessing. And I'm going to make your family a blessing. Of all nations of the earth, I'm going to make yours a blessing. I'm going to make your descendants blessed. And anyone who blesses them, I will bless those people. If anyone curses you, I will curse those people. I will be your fortress and your shield, your mighty protector. You are mine. You are my people. Like he is calling them out. Imagine living in a world, and maybe some of us feel this way today, living in a world where you believe that there are the gods, but you have no idea if you're ever on their good side. I have no idea if the gods like me or if the gods are angry with me. There's no real way of telling. So I have to just try to live in fear of the wrath of the gods, do everything I can to try to please them, and maybe, just maybe, they'll do something for me. Maybe, just maybe, my crops will grow. Maybe, just maybe, rain will come when I need it to. Maybe, just maybe, I'll have a child. Maybe, just maybe. But I have no way of knowing on a daily basis whether the gods like me or I'm favored by the gods. And then God changes that idea. He says, I am the one and only true God. And of all the nations of the earth, I'm picking you, and you will be my representatives. You will be blessed by me, and through you, I will bless all nations of the earth, and I will give you a land, and you can know that you know that you know that you are the people of the divine. Imagine that. I mean, imagine that. Imagine knowing that God, the divine, was actually pleased with you, blessed by you, and would be a blessing through you. We don't think about that enough, right? God is almost somewhat removed from our society and culture and idea, but for them it was very real. And to know that God was pleased with you was revolutionary. God is yet again changing the story. And so how, right? Genesis chapter 17 now. Breaking the cycle in Genesis 12, calling someone out to move from their land, doing something new. Genesis 15, the divine is making a covenant with a human being and saying, I will be your God and you'll be my people. And now in Genesis chapter 17, there's an actual side for Abram's family. This is what I'm asking of you. I went through the cut pieces. Now this is what I'm asking of you. This is how you carry out your side of the covenant. This is how you can still know that you are on my good side. This is how you can still know that we're in this covenant. Genesis chapter 17, when Abram was 99 years old. This dude's got a long story. 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you will greatly increase your numbers. Abram fell face down. God said to him, as for me, as for God, as for God's end of this covenant, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. And no longer will you be called Abram, which means father, but you will be called Abraham, father of many. For I have made you a father of many nations. I mean, imagine being 99 and hearing this. Maybe you've already given up on the promises of God. Maybe you've already given up that God's going to come through in your life. Maybe you're kind of done with this rat race of trying to make sure God's happy with you. Maybe you've given up on the dreams you feel like God put on your heart. Maybe you've just given up on this idea. God says, I will make you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you. Not only will I make nations of you, I will make kings come from you. He's calling greatness out of Abraham. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. I mean, imagine that. Yes, you're going to go to peace with your ancestors. You may never see the full abundance of the promise, but I am making an everlasting covenant with you and your people. Verse 8. The whole land of Canaan where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. Your sons will know that they have my favor. Your grandkids will know that they have the favor of the divine. Your great-grandchildren will know that they have the favor of the divine. I mean, isn't that our hope? I mean, I'm just a father of like a 5-year-old and going to be a 3-year-old, but those of you who are parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, is that not part of your hope? Is that not part of your prayer that you pray over your kids and your grandkids that they would know God and that God would know them? Isn't that part of the prayer? Isn't that part of the idea? So many incredible grandparents I've come along with on the way in ministry who that is just their daily prayer. God, would you be the God of my children and grandchildren? Would you reveal yourself to my grandchildren? Would you be present in their lives? Would you be their God? Would you be their God? And God is telling Abram, I will be their God. I will be their God, whether you see it or not. I am making an everlasting covenant. I will be their God. And then verse 9, then God said to Abraham, as for you, that's what I'll do. I will make you a great nation, more numerous than the stars in the sky. I will make you a blessing to the entire earth. I will bless anyone who blesses you, curse anyone who curses you. I will give you this land as your inheritance, and I will be the God, the divine, for your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren and so on and so forth for generations to come. Even when you are long gone, I will still uphold my covenant. That's what I'll do. Here is what you must do. As for you, you must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you for the generations to come. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Here it is. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You're to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. For generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born into your household or anyone brought in as a paid servant, any foreigner who's brought into your household. Whether born in your household or brought with your money, they must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant. Yeah, but what if we don't want to do that? Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people because he has broken my covenant. Genesis 12, Genesis 15, now Genesis 17. Do we get at least a little bit of a picture why this is a big deal? Do we get a little bit of a picture why in this Jewish faith, the Jewish culture, the Jewish tradition, why, if in the day of Paul, if anything were to be added, anything were to just be kind of like thrown into the mix with saved by grace and faith through Christ, if there was anything else that would be like ... and that it would be this. This was the covenant. This was the sign. This was the symbol. This was more than just an optional surgery. This was, if you do this, you will be a blessing. I will bless you. I'll curse those who curse you. If you do this, I will be your God, and you will know that the divine is on your side. If you do this, then I will make sure that this land is yours. If you do this, then I will follow you for generations to come. If you do this, I will be with you. If you don't, you'll be cut off from the covenant. Can you understand why there are people pushing back against Paul and saying, wait a second, you can't just throw this out. This isn't just a surgery. This is who we are. This is our identity. This is our culture. This is our tradition. This goes all the way back to the patriarch of patriarchs. You can't just remove this. This is how we know that the divine is with us. And if we don't do it, we're cut off. This is the tension. Let's try to put ourselves in this first century position. This is the tension that Paul is pushing against. The covenant will be in your flesh. So let's go back to Galatians chapter 2 and try to unravel what Paul is saying. Then after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem, this time with Barnabas. I took Titus along also. A couple things. He's admitting it's been 14 years since he went back to Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem was like the center. It was the capital of this early Christian movement. This is where the early apostles were. This is where Peter and James and John, like the actual disciples of Jesus were, right? And so for Paul to say, it's been 14 years since I've gone back to home base, it's been 14 years since I've actually been connected with those disciples, is kind of a big deal. It almost seems like they're not really that connected. You know, like if you were really a leader in this movement, don't you think you would have visited them more in the last 14 years? But he's saying, look, I just want to point out that the revelation, Shane talked about this in the last couple weeks, the revelation that I was given to preach to the Gentiles was given to me by Jesus, not them. I have nothing against them. But my message to the Gentiles was given to me from Jesus specifically and personally, right? It says that he brought with him Barnabas and Titus. Just real quick, it's important that he's doing this. He's going to Jerusalem to tell them he believes he has a revelation from God, a message from God, that these doors, that God is doing something new again. He's opening up the doors to not just the original invitees of the wedding. He is opening up the door now to anyone, whether they come from a Jewish culture or not, a Jewish tradition or not, a Jewish faith or not, that all the Gentiles are now able to take part in the message and hope of Jesus Christ. It's a big deal. And who does he bring with him? A man named Barnabas. Barnabas is a man who was already established in the Jewish faith in the capital city of Jerusalem. They already know him, and he's highly respected as a Jewish Christian. Titus is what? Greek and uncircumcised. So in a very symbolic way, Paul is showing up to Jerusalem with a living representation of, here is a circumcised Jew who loves Jesus. Here is an uncircumcised Greek who loves Jesus. This is my ministry. Do you get it? He's like bringing with them the representation. Here are two examples. If you have any doubt in your mind whatsoever that this can happen both ways, here is a circumcised Jew who loves Jesus. Here's an uncircumcised Greek named Titus who loves Jesus. That's how he's showing up to Jerusalem. He says, I went in response to a revelation. It is this burning thing in his heart that everyone should have access to the message of Jesus Christ. I went in response to revelation and meeting privately with those esteemed as leaders. More often than not, in this first century world, if you wanted to have some sort of discussion, it was usually public, right? You'd have these open space discussions, open space debates. That's how you would discuss things. I wonder if this is more of like a respect thing for Paul. I'm going to talk to those esteemed leaders in private. I'm going to pull them aside. This doesn't have to be a spectacle. This doesn't have to be a circus. This doesn't have to be some big public display. I'm going to respect them enough to do this privately, to discuss this. So he met with them privately. And I presented to them the gospel that I've been preaching among the Gentiles. I wanted to be sure that I was not running and had not been running my race in vain, that his ministry had not been for naught. He's presenting to them the message of Jesus for all people. Yet after their discussion, not even Titus, who was with me, was compelled to be circumcised, even though he was a Greek. So he comes with Barnabas, the living example of a circumcised Jewish individual who loves Jesus, and an uncircumcised Jesus lover named Titus. And even after the discussion, Titus didn't even feel compelled afterwards to say, you know what? They made a lot of good points. I think I should do this. Maybe they are right, Paul. Paul's saying, no, after that meeting, even Titus said he didn't feel compelled that he had to get circumcised. This matter arose because some false believers had infiltrated our ranks to spy on the freedom that we have in Christ Jesus and to make us slaves. Freedom, slaves. That there's a freedom in Christ. It's the message of Paul. I've been saved by grace through faith. That's it. I respect the tradition. I respect the culture. I know that God highly favors the history and the heritage and the Jewish faith and culture and tradition. But Paul's saying, I believe that once again God was doing something new. That God was opening up a brand new door. That all peoples of the earth have now access to the message of Jesus Christ. That God's covenant to Abram is actually still being fulfilled. That through that family, I will bless all nations of the earth. This is potentially how all nations of the earth will be blessed through Abram and Abraham's family, because they brought the Messiah. It was from their line that God became flesh in Jesus the Christ. It's because of that. And now Paul is saying a door has been opened to everyone, not to be enslaved to a covenant in my own flesh, but a covenant in his flesh. That the covenant now was in his death. The covenant that Jesus seals at that Last Supper before his death, where he says, this is my body broken for you. This is my blood poured out for you. This is the new covenant. I am now the one being cut. I am now the one being slaughtered. I am now the lamb slain from the foundations of the earth. It's me. It's not in your flesh that the covenant will be made known. It is in my flesh that is broken and bruised and bleeding. The covenant is now in me, not in anything that you can do on your own. He says, we did not give in to them for a moment so that the truth of the gospel might be preserved for you. As for those who are held in high esteem, these apostles, whatever they were makes no difference to me. I don't know if he's just being sassy. He's like, whatever they are, I don't care. Sure, Peter, James, and John, like the original disciples, the top three, the ones that Jesus loved, whatever, big deal. Or if he's trying to make a point where he's like, God just doesn't show favoritism. Like, yeah, I understand who they are. I respect who they are, right? But even they didn't add anything to my message. When I gave them the best of my sermons, when I gave them my back pocket A-game evangelistic sermon that I've been giving to the Greeks, they listened to it. They didn't give me any critique of something I need to add to it. That's what he's saying. I went to the Jerusalem's Got Talent, and I gave my best message I could possibly give, right? And they all gave me a thumbs up. They all said yes to me, right? They pushed me straight on to Hollywood. They didn't have any problem with my message. They didn't add anything to it. On the contrary, they recognized. Instead, they actually recognized that I have been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter has been to the circumcised. All of a sudden, this door is being opened up. The apostles of Jesus, those original disciples, are saying, Paul, I think you're right. I think you're onto something. I remember Jesus saying to all nations of the earth, I think you're onto that. So I think, yeah, you can be the head of preaching to everyone who's a Gentile, just as Peter is recognized as the one who's going to preach to all of the Jewish traditional faith believers. A door is being opened. God is doing something new. For God, who was at work in Peter as an apostle of the circumcised, was also at work in me as an apostle of the Gentiles. James, Cephas, if you're taking notes, Cephas is just another name for Peter. James, Peter, and John, those esteemed as pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship. In other words, they said, okay, you're good. We agree with you. Be blessed. Go speak to the Gentiles. Speak to the uncircumcised. They agreed that we should go to the Gentiles, they to the circumcised. Verse 10, all that they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor. What a unique thing to add on there of all the things. Remember the poor. Jerusalem was hit in this time during this first century with disease, with disruption, with dissension, persecution. Some actually believe that this early Roman world could have been taxed up to 90%, or your taxes were 90% of your income, which obviously just divides between the haves and the have-nots. And so these early disciples are saying, if anything, just continue to remember the poor. Throughout his ministry, Paul would gather funds and bring them back to Jerusalem. So he says, that's the very thing I've been eager to do all along. Like this event that Paul just described as this opening door, it is God doing something new. All of a sudden, he is really making good on the covenant that Jesus talked about at his Last Supper. There is a new covenant in my flesh, not your flesh, my flesh. It's not about what you do, it's about what I'm doing. This is in me, an everlasting covenant. So in Matthew 22, Jesus tells a story. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying the kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, tell those who have been invited that I prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened calf, the cattle have been butchered. Everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet. But they paid no attention and they went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, mistreated and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army to destroy those murderers and burn their cities. Then he said to his servants, what does a king do when not all the originally invited come? I mean, what is the picture that might be being painted in Paul's trip now to Jerusalem? What might be taking place that Jesus already told a story about? The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the streets. Go to the street corners. The ones who didn't have an invitation, who weren't a part of the first round, who weren't on the A list, the elite list. Go to the street corners and invite them to the banquet. Invite anyone you find. So the servants went out in the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. For the sake of time, I'm just going to end that passage there. I wonder if Jesus is painting a picture of exactly what's happening here, what Paul is talking about. I have no doubt, and please don't misunderstand me, I believe that God has extremely powerful plans for the Jewish people, the Jewish faith, the Jewish culture, the Jewish tradition. But just as he did something new in Genesis 12, just as he did something new in Genesis 15, just as he did something new in Genesis 17, I think he's doing something new through Christ, as if opening up a door and saying that this gospel message, this message of salvation, the idea that I can know, that I know, that I know, that I am good with the divine, that the divine likes me, that I am in relationship with the divine, that the divine is looking well on me, that I could be blessed with the divine, that the idea of that connection to the vine could be an open door now, not just to one nation, but to all nations. And that through that open door, right, that the promise he made to Abram hundreds and thousands of years ago, he said, you're going to go to peace with your ancestors, but just know, generations will come after you. And because of your family, all nations of the earth will be blessed. Because through that family came God in the flesh, and he made a new covenant in his own body, in his own blood, to open up something to all of us so we could sit here today and believe that I don't have to walk out of here not knowing if God loves me, likes me, has forgiven me, if I'm on good terms with the divine. I don't have to live in a sense of fear or ache or worry or be burned out because I keep trying to do more and more and more, which brings me to this question of scarcity. Why do we think we have to do more and more and more? I think it has to do with this word. Now, normally we use the word scarcity in like economic, financial, or consumer goods, resources terms, right? Simply put, scarcity comes from the word scarce. Scarce means deficient in quantity or number compared with the demand. There's a really high demand for something, but not a whole lot of supply, and so it is scarce, right? I think scarcity does at least two things. Scarcity often changes the value of something, right? If there's a high demand for something but a low supply, all of a sudden the value for that thing starts going up. Case in point, Christmas 1996. I told you we'd get there. Christmas 1996. It's like Hunger Games for parents. You proved whether you were a good parent on how you came out of Christmas 1996. Because there's the toy to end all toys. It was small, red, furry, and if you tickled it, it giggled in a very creepy way. And it was called Tickle Me Elmo. Resale price for Tickle Me Elmo was originally put at $30. Some parents paid upwards of $1,000 or more to get one. Why? High demand, low supply. There were ER records of individuals from Walmarts and stores who would go into the ER because they actually got beaten down by parents trying to get a Tickle Me Elmo. Concussions, broken ribs, actual visits to the hospital because parents turned into monsters. Because in a world of scarcity, it's all about if you can get some. And if you can, then you protect it and you guard it and you make it exclusive when you think it's scarce. The two things that scarcity does is that we assume a higher value must be necessary for it. And the second thing it does is it makes us guard it and protect it and put up safeguards around it because I have it. And if I have it, I'm afraid that if you have it, I have less of it. And I wonder if sometimes what Paul is getting at, the door that he's opening up, is that we don't have to live with this idea of this salvation scarcity, this salvific scarcity that said there's only so much grace to go around. There's only so much forgiveness to go around. Surely there is a limit to the grace and the forgiveness and love of God. And so if you really want to be loved and forgiven by God, then the price has to go up. It has to be more than what I think it is. We have to be paying more than $30 for the Tickle Me Elmo. It has to be like $1,000 or more. Some people even tried to cash in their season football tickets for Tickle Me Elmo. Just take me to the game, Dad. Give me a brat. It has to be more than this. And I wonder if that's the message, part of the message that's being brought into this Galatian church. But even more than that, I wonder if that's part of the message that we still sometimes believe today. There's got to be something more. It has to be more than just his death on the cross. It has to be more because surely there's not enough grace to go around for you and me and you and them and them. There can't be enough grace. So we have to put more parameters on it. We have to put more price tags on it. We have to make it more expensive to get to because there's just not enough to go around if it's scarce. But what if we changed our thinking? And instead of thinking of salvation and whether we're on good terms with God or blessed by God or liked by God or forgiven by God, if we can know that we know that we know that we're forgiven by God, what if we change our thinking from this salvific or salvation scarcity to a salvicious? That sounds malicious. A salvific salvation surplus. That actually there is more than enough to go around. That actually there's enough grace for God to completely meet you where you are. Whatever you're going through, whatever baggage we have in our life, or how many mistakes we think we've made or are still making, that there's enough grace and forgiveness for you and the person next to you. And the person in the next row over, and the person outside those doors, and the person downtown. What if we actually changed our thinking from scarcity to surplus and said, God, I don't understand this grace thing, but if you're doing something new, then maybe, just maybe, you have enough grace and forgiveness for everyone. Because then all of a sudden, we realize that the price actually was very high, but it's nothing you could ever add to it because it's not in your flesh, it's in his. That was the highest price that could ever be paid for anything. So if I think I can add something to that, it almost lessens his sacrifice. But when I know there's absolutely nothing I can add to it, then I see it as holy and set apart. What could I add to that? But we do it in our church sometimes. Not like our church, but like the church in general. We've been doing it, I think, in some ways or another for 2,000 years. You're not really a Christian because you're not part of this one church. Right? Unless you're part of this one denomination, you're not really a Christian. Right? On the flip side of that, it's like, well, everyone who's not a part of that one tradition, now we actually have it. It's actually in us, not them. We're putting up safeguards. Who actually gets to own this? It's almost like we believe God put us in charge of dispersing his salvation and we get to create the rules. And all these things are good and they're great, but it's not adding to this. Right? If I get baptized, then not really a Christian, you didn't get baptized. But if you get baptized multiple times, then you get more raffles and more tickets in the raffle. You got to go to this class. You got to be a member here. Not really a Christian if you play electric guitar or drums. It's not true Christianity unless you read this one translation. We keep putting safeguards on it. Why? Because I think a part of us are a little scared. I think part of us want to hold to it. Like we want the truth. We want to fight for that truth and represent that truth. But what if the truth is that there's so much grace to go around? That this is really what it is. This. What if God did something new and opened up a brand new door? Because I think what we're afraid of is like what? So then, like maybe the people are coming back to Paul and saying, so what? So you just let anyone into this faith thing? So anyone can just come to this? Anyone can be a part of this? They haven't lived through our tradition. They haven't lived through our culture. They haven't gone to our church. They haven't lived their whole life in this tradition. They didn't go to Sunday school. They didn't learn everything on like sticky felt things and Velcro. They didn't learn all that. They didn't were a part of this. They didn't go to Bible school. They're not a part of this denomination. They didn't read from this Bible. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. Look at all the things they did wrong. Surely there's enough grace for me, but not them. And what if this God is simply saying, like, there's enough of my grace and forgiveness to go around? And not only that, I love that you come to church. And I love that you go to classes. That's all good and great. I love that you're learning. But there's nothing you could do to make me forgive you more than I already have. And I wonder if he would even say, there's nothing you can do to make me forgive you less. I forgive you and love you perfectly through that. I love you, and I love your ambition, and I love your passion. Go for it. But don't think that my favor is resting on that. Don't think that my delight in you is resting on that. I love you because I love you because I love you. And so where do we go from here? So who's in and who's out? Maybe it's not really the question. Who can be in, who can be out? Anyone. And so I said at the beginning, maybe some of us who are here, or some of us who are watching online, we live with that worry, that concern, that weight, that over-spiritualized sense of guilt and condemnation that says there's got to be something more. There's something more I should be doing. I have Aaron, if you're back there. Aaron, if you're back there. There's got to be something more. And I come in contact with way too many people who live in that weight and live in that condemnation and live in that sense of almost like a guilt. There's got to be more. There's got to be more that I have to do. Maybe to make up for all the things I did in the past. Or to make sure that God likes me in the future. And that true freedom comes from in this moment, right here, right now, when you truly, truly believe what we say here all the time, is that if you've put your faith in that death and resurrection, there's absolutely nothing you can do to be forgiven more by God. I can't add to that. And that doesn't mean that God doesn't invite me to live a different life. I don't want you to mishear that. I think that there's this true, I want to transform my life. I want to change things in my life. I want to act more like he calls me to act and live more like he calls me to live. But when it comes down to how would I know that I'm good with God, there's nothing you can do to be forgiven more by God. And there's nothing you can do to be forgiven less. There's nothing you can do to be loved more by God. There's nothing you can be to love less by God. In this moment, my prayer is that you leave here and truly, truly believe for yourself that you are 100% absolutely, undeniably loved and forgiven by God in an everlasting covenant in his flesh, not yours. Not yours. Again, that doesn't mean that there's some things in my life I'm going to have to fight against, some things I'm going to need to change, some things that I really do want to transform. There's nothing you can do to add to that. That's one of the challenges, but the other one is this. So we have to truly fight to believe that for ourselves. And then it almost becomes a little more uncomfortable. Because we got to fight to believe that for others. We got to stop putting up walls and safeguards and hoarding that grace, hoarding that forgiveness, and saying, well, there's enough grace for me, but I don't know that there's enough grace for that person or those people. I know what they've done. I know what they think. I know what they believe. I know how they vote. There's no way there's enough grace to go around for them. Unless maybe there is. If there's a moment in their life where they put their faith in Christ, then maybe there's nothing they could do to be forgiven more by God or forgiven less by God. are loved more by God, are loved less by God. Because when we move from scarcity to surplus, it's not about hoarding it. It's not about stockpiling it. It's about releasing it. It's about giving it. It's about sharing it. It's about spreading it. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's what makes it so beautiful. There's enough for me, and God will meet me right where I am, and there's enough for you, and them. Would you stand? God, thank you for your message. Thank you for your word. And may we leave here believing that there is nothing we could do to add to your death. Oh, change us and transform us into your likeness. But there's nothing we can do to add to your death. The covenant is in you. May we leave here with a sense of a fresh breath of grace, of love, of mercy. There's nothing I can do. Would you cut off the strings of baggage from the past? Would you cut off condemnation? Would you allow us to live in the freedom that I'm saved by grace through faith in you? And that is it. May we leave here not in deficit, but in surplus. To give it away, to share it, and to spread it. That you opened up something new for all of us. In your name, amen. Thank you all.